You're listening to Talking Law with Despina Priala from Priala Legal. And thank you so much, Mike, for sending in this question. He wanted to know whether you're legally allowed to remove or trim your neighbour's tree or hedge if it's hanging in your own yard, in your own property. And it's so funny. It seems like such a simple thing, but people go ballistic over this stuff. So, Despina, what is actually legal in New South Wales?
Yeah, so interesting question. We've talked about Queensland law previously, and it is a little bit different in New South Wales in that there is provision in the Queensland legislation about, yes, if you have overhanging branches, cut them down, throw them back over the neighbour's fence, and then they can deal with it as they please. I don't think it's as easy as that in New South Wales, and in Queensland, it's also qualified. I mean, you can't just cut down any tree. What if the tree is preserved? What if it's, something that's got an order on it where you can't actually touch it because of the girth of the tree itself? So, there's always qualifying rules for things like that. But look, in New South Wales, you've got this legislation like Queensland called the Trees Disputes Between Neighbours Act. And, it deals
You're
with
kidding. Is that what it's called?
yes, trees disputes between
Dispute
neighbours
Against
act.
Neighbours Act. I love that.
Yes, I love these titles, which
Mm.
is essentially what it is, isn't it? You've got a dispute with your neighbour about a tree.
Mm.
And trees are also defined as hedges as well. So, look, what can it govern? So, the first thing I will say, like in Queensland, try and resolve it with your neighbour first. The article that I think Mike sent me or pointed out to me was about, it's called Sisters in Law Dispute Turns Ballistic in New South Wales, in a local area near you guys. So look, it can get out of control. If you go to court, the court will look at how reasonable the parties were leading up to the court a hearing date. So they take that into account. So if an applicant who applies for a tree order to deal with something on their land or adjoining land hasn't even tried to mediate with the neighbour, the court's going to take that into account. They're also going to take into account any unreasonable conduct. So it's within your interest first to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Neighbour, let's try and be friends and try and resolve this dispute. Well, it doesn't always go that way, does it? Because it depends on human behaviour, and we've seen that at our worst in this country. And, you'd like to think people are reasonable, but they're not sometimes. So you can actually apply to the court to try and get orders for, remedy or restrain or prevent, damage from trees or hedges to your property. And hedges, be clear, we're only dealing with, because it's specific in the Act, if the hedge is more than 2.5 metres, yeah, that's when we can deal with
Oh.
hedges as well. So there is a limit on hedges, but hedges are included in this act and dealing with trees per se. But there's also a list of what a tree is, and it defines it as well. So we don't need to go into that.
Yeah.
But so if it is a tree likely to cause damage or personal injury, that's where it comes from. Okay, so is this tree likely to cause damage to my property or personal injury? Because, for example, you can see the branches on its last legs and it might drop down whilst you've got kids playing under it or something like that. Or it might drop over on your roof if the houses are quite close together. So if you approach the neighbour and they don't want to know about it, yes, in New South Wales, you can go to the Land and Environment Court and make an application for these orders. All right. But you've got to prove certain things first. Now, when it comes to hedges, for example, you've got to prove that the hedge severely obstructs, okay, sunlight to a window, okay, or a view. And the court's got to be satisfied
Oh.
that it actually severely obstructs, the sunlight or the view, and the interest of that person having that obstructed outweighs, cutting down or some issue with the tree where it shouldn't be cut down because it might provide protection for someone else. So there's a few things to prove to the court. But the court also will take into account things like, and people might not think about this, for example, what if the tree or interference with the tree is going to impact on legislation such as environmental legislation, the Heritage Act, the Vegetation Management Act? So they will look at things like that. They'll also look at things like, well, what if the tree provides privacy or sun shading and other aspects? What if it's part of the design of the property? What if it's got historical or cultural or scientific value? So those are the things that the court also looks at. They also look at the contribution of the tree to the ecosystem. So it's not as easy as, hey, I don't like that tree. It's blocking sunlight into my room. I want it cut down. The court's going to look at a number of aspects, which is why I said to Mike on the Facebook, well, probably, but it's not black and white. We'll talk about it on air. So there are quite a few things to it that people need to be aware of. Yeah.
Now, Despina, that you talked about what's above the ground. What about below the ground? What about the roots? Because of course, roots tend to go as wide from the tree as they do high. So it could affect underneath your house or on your property in general. There's those issues as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good argument that, and I've seen it in Queensland, where the roots of trees, fig trees are notorious for it because they stick out water, and then they'll go into the plumbing. So there's been lots of cases here where council, like 20 years ago, planted fig trees on council land in front of your property, but planted it way too close to the properties themselves. So the fig tree roots go and attach themselves, or they find themselves inside plumbing, which might be under your carport or garage, which is quite close to the road.
So do they have to remove all those?
Well, I've actually successfully won against council where, yes, it's with the responsibility not just to cut down the tree itself, because you can't just cut down a fig tree. Here, you actually will get them to repair your pipes, but that's another that's
another talking law topic, right there.
Exactly. But look, this is serious. So if you go to a court and you get a tree order, right, and you get that, you want to actually, the person who has the tree order against them, so that has to remedy the work or have the tree cut down or whatever the issue is, they've got to comply with that order, because there are big hefty fines and penalties if they don't comply with the order. And the other thing is, if you change ownership, so if you sell your property and you've got a tree order against you and you haven't complied with it, that tree order runs with the land. So the new owner that comes in will be subject to that tree order. So as a buyer, try and do your searches if there's a tree order in place. Really, really important, which you can do searches to find that out. It's
not so black and white.
It's something that you hopefully will never have to get into. But if you do, like I said, try and resolve it with your neighbour first. Courts will ask that question, and try and act reasonably, not like a Fruit Loop. And then if not, and if your neighbour's acting like a Fruit Loop, then, use that term loosely.
That's a legal term, yeah.
Exactly. Then you can have to go to court and get that order. But you've got to prove these things first. So you've got to do all your homework, establish all of the aspects to why you want that tree removed or the hedge removed, and then go from there.
Yeah, the last thing you do, I think, is get that to decline from your neighbours and then go up there and cut it down yourself. I think definitely don't go take matters into your own hands.
Yeah, that's right. And there's also the option of trying to claim compensation if there has already been damage. If you've proven that you've tried to discuss it with your neighbour in an orderly fashion and they've refused, and then before you got to court, that branch has fallen down or there's been damage done to the property, there's potential for claiming for compensation for that damage. So always collect your evidence along the way, record conversations that you have with your neighbour or make file notes. There's a lot involved, but hopefully that's answered Mike's question anyway.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Despina. If anyone does want to get in touch with you with a question or some legal advice, where can they go?
So they can phone our office, 55291 294. They can email info@prialalegal.com.au. And then if you've just come in now for the last minute, hopefully not though, you've heard the whole show, then we'll have it on YouTube later in the week and you can listen to it again.
Thank you so much, Despina and Wayne.
And we'll do it next week.
See you then, guys.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.